since 2007, thanks to Kim Lyons, who,
I was your first follower, wasn't I?
yes, and it really, I mean, almost immediately I realized what a powerful tool it is, and it really does help me considerably in my job.
Hi, my name is Mila Sanina. I'm the social media for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I worked for CNN International before in PBS NewsHour, and I'm really excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Bobby Cherry. I'm a reporter for the Tribune Review and the Strictly Herald, and I am a native of Pittsburgh, and I too am excited to be here with all of you, including the hecklers up front.
I'm Scott Harbaugh. I do weather at Channel 11. I've learned a lot since I've been here at 9 o'clock this morning, and I have no official comment on Frankenstorm whatsoever.
And so I'm Kim Lyons. I've been at the Post-Gazette since January. I've also worked at Trib, at the Pittsburgh Business Times, at a couple of other news organizations. So feeling kind of old listing my resume there. But what we wanted to talk about was some of the ways that people in the media use social media to do their jobs, to disseminate information, and some of the sort of challenges that we face, that we deal with on a daily basis that maybe don't occur to folks who are watching at home or read the paper the next day, or watching television. So I think a lot of the stuff that happens behind the scenes happens so quickly, and things are very fluid especially during a breaking news event, that you have to make decisions on the fly a lot of the time. And sometimes you get it right, and sometimes you don't. But hopefully you learn from the times that you don't necessarily make the call you wish you had made. So we did a evening with Podcamp before, to sort of try and get us a little bit familiar with the things we want to talk about. And so one of the things that came up there that I thought was a really interesting point of discussion was, you'll remember several weeks back when there was a hostage situation at Gateway Center, and happened during the morning rush. A guy took a hostage in the downtown office building, and for several hours, no one was really sure what was going on. Did he have a bomb? Did he have a gun? Did he have a knife? Were there multiple hostages? And we were learning things sort of as you learned them, we were learning them. And it was a very interesting situation as it evolved, because the hostage taker was using his Facebook page to communicate during the situation, and we found out later that the police were actually using the Facebook page to communicate with him and to sort of negotiate and try and have a peaceful resolution. So it was a very hectic situation. It was one of those situations where while you're in it, you know that this is going to be something that you're going to have to deal with probably again in the future. But we struggled a lot with should we be putting a link to his Facebook page up on our website, because we had very heavy traffic that day. We had a lot of people want to know what's going on downtown. They have their husbands, wives, children, relatives going to work. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't know, if you were having trouble getting in touch with someone, it was a very frightening situation. So as we were getting information, we were passing along quickly, but we were concerned, do we put up this Facebook page and potentially become part of the story, enable the situation to get worse or better, or whatever. If we put this Facebook page up and then something terrible happens, in a live situation, posts a picture of something bad that he's done in this situation, what's the ramifications of that? So these are all things that are going on in the newsroom at the time, but I thought it was an interesting sort of how each news outlet handled it. And I remember, Scott Harbaugh was actually tweeting a lot of information in real time, because he was one of the few people that wasn't actually on the scene, but was in the newsroom. So, Scott, maybe you could talk a little bit about what it was like at the PXI newsroom, because my sense is it was very similar to what was going on in our newsroom at the time, is that we were getting a lot of information and not sure what to put out and not to.
Yeah, I mean, we were very careful, but as Kim was saying, I was doing weather that morning, and there comes a point in time where you realize, okay, you're not going to be doing weather the rest of the morning, so make yourself valuable. And I've tried to make myself valuable with social media at work, so basically, I kept my earpiece in, listened to everything that every reporter said, didn't tweet things that I thought were going to be misfacts, but tweeted what the reporters were reporting, and kept my ear to the newsroom. I do believe, I don't know this for sure, but I do believe that we were fortunate enough to be one of the first to tweet, not necessarily get on the air, but tweet that the hostage situation was over because we heard it on the scanner, the police confirmed it. Nobody in the newsroom was doing it because they're all busy, so I'm just sitting there, tweet it out, and that's, you have to wear multiple hats. You can't just do the job that you're doing. You got to do everything in order to make it all work.
And Bobby, can you talk a little bit about what your experience was like that day? It was a little bit different than, because you weren't in the newsroom at that time, correct?
Right, I was at home, and I had not yet left for work, and I normally wouldn't have covered it anyway, so I just sat there as a viewer, but with the reporter adrenaline going, watching Scott, listening to Marty Griffin on KDKA radio, and then flipping between KDKA TV and Channel 11.
And the Post-Gazette website.
And the Post-Gazette website, to just sort of see how everybody was covering it and to see the different sides of where people were finding the news, who was interviewing potential victims or using the Facebook page and who had what information, and just sort of using it to sort of gauge all the aspects of traditional media and social media. And it was an overwhelming experience to watch how all of that played out.
Yeah. And so it was one of those situations where I feel like we didn't, it was uncharted territory. And I feel like in the media we're going to have more and more of that as social media becomes much more a part of how we do our jobs and the tools that we use, Twitter and Facebook, getting information out quickly. Having a suspect in a hostage situation, using it to negotiate with the police or to, for people to comment during this hostage situation was, I had never come across that. So it was definitely an interesting situation. I think we're going to find ourselves in more often. So I also want to talk a little bit about how we try to engage with readers. Social media is ever changing. It's very fast moving. It's something that you learn sort of one way to do things, and then there's something new. There's a new platform or a new service or something, a new trend that you have to sort of investigate and see if it'll work for you. So Mila, who handles the Post-Gazette's social media, I wanted to get your take, Mila, on how do you keep track of everything? Because I think that came up in another session. You can't really. You have to decide how to disseminate information and how to engage readers. And so, do you look at it as a sort of per story, handle things a little bit differently based on what the story involves, or what's happening at that moment, or sort of some of the things when you're deciding how to put information out on our social media platforms?
Well, I think it all depends on the story. With breaking news story, sometimes you just, you think on the fly and you hope that you are doing your job very well and making sure that, all the news that you're reporting, you're making ethical decisions, and also things that, if you're sending the reporter on the field that this person will be tweeting and will be getting information out, keeping in consideration all the integrity and ethical concerns that we in the newsroom might discuss beforehand. It has happened with the Western Psych shooting when two of our reporters went to the site and were tweeting from there. But we have actually had a sort of uncertainty because there were a lot of reporters there and a lot of people who were taking pictures, and because of the situation, because it was the institution it was just not right for us to put it out on social media platforms because of the ethical considerations in the community. You are dealing with the psychiatric institution. So sometimes depending on the news, if it's a planned news coverage, you can plan out, you can basically divide and conquer. You sometimes appoint reporters who are either covering an event or reporting from the site. The same thing happened with the Sandusky verdict. It was pre-planned coverage, we knew, but we didn't know when the verdict was coming. And because we had a reporter who was near Sandusky's house, and he snapped a photo of him on Friday evening leaving the house, and it was the first tip-off to the media corps that the verdict was coming. We have been waiting for it the entire week, and we didn't know. We sort of left our work, expecting that it's going to come out next week, and then
Because it was a Friday evening when it finally broke.
Yes, and then, I put together Storify, which is a platform, if you haven't used it, with Twitter, sometimes it's frustrating because if you tweet a lot of tweets, especially with breaking news, everybody's tweeting about it, and it just scrolls off. So it's very hard to say that Storify is a great platform to tell a story through social media. And this Sandusky Storify was something that helped you to go back to that time and see how it broke on Twitter. And the first tweet was by Mark Dent, who was there and snapped this photo, and his tweet sort of went viral because people started retweeting it and getting a tip-off that the verdict was coming.
Yeah, Mila actually uses Storify, I think, really well. She's a good example of how to with Storify. Very often, Storify they do a daily update, and we'll send her our Storifys that she's put together as examples of good news coverage. So it's definitely a tool that, like she said, helps curate a live event via social media. So you have this full display of tweets and of photos, and during the election, there's a lot of gifts that go around of debates. And so incorporating all of that into one place is a really, Storify is a tool that really can help you augment how you tell the story.
I also think that this platform could be used not only by people who work in the newsroom, but people who are, engaged in marketing efforts or public relations, because sometimes you want to show the examples that worked, and on Twitter especially. And it's very hard to save a tweet or to tell a story compellingly visually so a person understands and can relate to it. So I think Storify is a great tool not only for the newsroom folks, but also folks who work in other industries.
So Scott Beveridge, I wanted to talk to you about a little bit about what the OR does with social media. And I know I follow you guys on Facebook because you have a really interesting Facebook page. So how much is that a part of your strategy, and what other pieces does your strategy involve as far as getting your news out there and getting connected to your audience?
About a year ago, the directive came down from the top that everyone in the newsroom had to use Twitter, and everyone had to have a Facebook page and use it to draw post links to draw more readership to the Observer Reporter's website. Some of us have sort of kind of like had a temporary love affair with it and just sort of kind of slacked off, and there are others who really quickly learned how great it is, especially Twitter, to find sources, to get quotes, and but I wanted to chime in just real quickly on
please do.
the problem that we're seeing in the news industry, that there's this rush for everyone to be first, and it doesn't sometimes the rush to be first, it's inaccurate. So it hurts your label, and I would say that reporters, probably just about anybody in general, should really think twice before they retweet something or tweet something. And I mean, as you know, reporters killed Paterno prematurely, and
On Twitter.
yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting topic, and one that I think reporters really struggle with is, at the end of the day, no one remembers if you're first and right, but they remember if you're first and wrong. There's been a couple of high-profile situations with ABC News, with CNN, tweeting on information that was later, not very much later, a few minutes later, shown to be incorrect. So it's one of those situations where, I forget who told me this, but it's great advice to, wait 10 seconds before you tweet. Make sure you're, number one, tweeting from your professional account, not your personal account, or vice versa, if you don't want to be tweeting about.
There have been many times where I've put out a tweet about asking my followers how they feel about a particular subject, and the response is really incredibly quick, and a lot of these people who I follow and they follow back, I know them in the real world as dependable sources, so you can actually write a story without leaving your desk just based on the quotes that are coming across your Twitter stream.
Yeah, and that's something, Mila, we've talked about in our newsroom, is for reporters that are a little more reluctant to get involved with Twitter, to think of it less as not just as a broadcasting tool, but also as an information gathering tool.
These folks will send you photos of spot news. There's people who will get in their car and drive down the street and see if something is really burning on fire, so that we know before we're sending someone 30 miles to cover something that we have people on the ground who are doing this for free.
And one thing that Bobby and I were talking about before is something that Neil and I deal with on a daily basis, and that's the whole notion of comments on for a few months, March, I believe, Neil, correct? And it's very tricky and very much fraught with, incomplete information or answers that just aren't quite out there, because it's still very much a, ongoing, evolving situation. And so I wanted to, people often email us and say, you don't have comments open on story X, and we have a sort of rules and regulations about what we want comments open on. In general, we want to encourage, discourse, we want to encourage conversation, but there are stories about rape, for example, stories about violent crimes, murders, that we maybe don't want to have comments open because the discourse, what's the discourse here? What are you going to say about this rape that's adding to the public conversation? So that's sort of my overall philosophy about it. But just to give you a look at what it looks like on the back end when we moderate comments, they all come into one big bucket. And, people like to write screeds. They like to write manifestos, and they like to write long and involved and disguised curse words with asterisks or what have you. So it can get very overwhelming. And so I think, people get frustrated when a comment thread is closed or isn't open on a given story, but we do this all in-house. Most of it falls on Mila's desk, and so it can get very overwhelming when there's a very hot topic, when there's a conversation that's very, very hot and very, what is it? It's probably Bobby.
No, just laughing at the
There's 83,000 more that I haven't even scrolled to yet. So Mila, what is our average on a daily basis?
Well,
How many?
It depends, again, if it's a heavy news day, sometimes on one story like voter ID, we can get 600 comments in 12 hours, and every single comment is read by a person. We do, it was a sort of collective decision to invest and to, in this user-generated content infrastructure, because some newsrooms do not think that comments should be moderated, or do not think that it should be they shouldn't have comments at all. You go to Huffington Post, although they do claim to have moderators, it's a sort of algorithm that works and filters through the content. But some threads that I generated there, can't believe that it got through the filter. So I think that some newsrooms take very like New York Times, 17 articles per day, and we decide to close them after 24 hours. Our threads, if they're open forever, and you can keep commenting as much as you please. Sometimes we have constant followers who spend their days there and argue, especially now with the political season being. So
Hear that sigh in your voice there.
But I think that sometimes it is very interesting to see, and in terms of even how we're going to cover certain topic, we say this topic generated so many comments, we have to cover it because people are interested, or we get feedback on what are we not doing well, or what is the community's perception. People sometimes point out that our typos, and we're very grateful for that because it allows us to correct us. So there are a lot of levels of engagement that we really appreciate, and we try to make as much value as we can out of this engagement. There's so many platforms out there, and just like probably in every session you have heard here that. Find your demographic, find your platform that works for you. I think it's sometimes tricky for, at least I think for the Post-Gazette, because you want sort of to be where all types of demographics are, and get your content read and get more more groups involved and engaged in conversation. That's why we try to maybe find our niche in different platforms. You know, if it's Pinterest, we're going to feature our features content. If it's Facebook, we probably portray more of multimedia content and conversations that could be, maybe on the homepage when Kim is thinking what is going to be put out there, and the story gets it disappears from the homepage. It doesn't get as much exposure, so I post it on social media platforms so it gets more commenting and more shares and more engagement.
Yeah, and a story that does well online is not always one that's on A1 of the newspaper. I think a good example would be there's been a spate of accidents involving bicyclists in the city in the past several months, and those have produced a massive amount of feedback online to the point where it doesn't seem like as big of a story in print if it's happened the day before, but it takes on almost a life of its own online. It's a community that our Facebook and our Twitter followers, they're very much active in this community in Pittsburgh. So it helped us sort of shape the coverage and say to the editors, hey, there's a lot of interest in this story, maybe more than you thought. This is probably something worth pursuing and worth making into perhaps a larger story for the print edition than you had considered, because we are getting so much feedback online.
Well, it definitely shapes. You remember the young boy at Children's Hospital that they did the Facebook thing, the ice cream social, the Sunday social? Mm-hmm. One of our reporters pitched that to our news department about 3 days before it blew up on Facebook, and they said, no, that's not the kind of thing we cover. Then 3 days later...
I hear that at meetings all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Then 3 days later, it blew up on Facebook, and there we are practically leading with it on the 11 o'clock news one night, because we don't always understand. Sometimes what is a good story isn't necessarily a sexy story.
Or an engaging story.
Or an engaging story. And, this is where this is starting to really paint what's happening on a daily basis far more than ever before.
Right, absolutely. So I wanted to open just up to you guys, and if Bobby, if you want to talk about a situation where you were, I think it was you were saying earlier at Neville Island when there was an incident where a
Actually,
worker
it's Swickley.
was Swickley. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe you could talk a little bit about that and how you used. Sometimes you're beset by technology in our field, and you can't always get the information where you want it, when you want it. Let's put it that way. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that and how you use social media to kind of get the word out of what's going on.
Sure, and I'll put my phone down for this.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
What Kim's referring to is a couple years ago there was a wastewater treatment plant situation where a man, where a situation occurred at the plant in Swickley, and ultimately a man died in the accident. We had heard the fire trucks. Swickley still has a fire whistle at the fire hall, so we heard it go off, but the fire trucks had left before the whistle went off. So that's how we knew. Our office is a block from the fire hall, so we knew something was really wrong. So I took, and instead of even grabbing my car keys, I just started running toward the fire trucks. And I got down to where a police officer was. He told me to just go to the wastewater plant, so I did. And my photographer and I were probably 50 feet from where this whole thing was unfolding. There were a couple men trapped inside of a sewage plant area that they were renovating. And by that point, the other media had showed up, the TV stations, the other newspapers in town. But we were inside the area that the police had blocked off, and they allowed us to stay. So I was live tweeting everything that I knew or that I was observing. And in the newsroom down in the north side of the Clark building for the trip, they were taking my tweets and making that our story online. So everything I was tweeting, from quotes to how many people were being pulled out of the situation, there was, when the final guy came out, he was the one that ultimately died in the situation, and the one police chief came up to us and told us that he was in grave condition. Rather than tweeting he was in grave condition, because I couldn't confirm anything other than that, I just said all of the men have been rescued, working on conditions with the hospital or something like that, and because I couldn't just source it from the police chief. I wanted more, specific information. But we were the only, the other news sources that were there were watching our tweets to get the information because they were probably a half a mile away, blocked from seeing anything. So our photos and our tweets were essentially the only amount of information that people knew of what was going on. And that was the first time that I realized, I used Twitter for other breaking news type situations, but that was the first time I really saw the importance of it in a breaking news story when I had no other way to get it out there about what was happening except for Twitter.
Yeah, so sometimes, and that to me is a valuable use of Twitter, is using it to actually form a story,
Right.
while at the same time getting information out there on
Because
Twitter.
essentially those quotes and the information, like I said, were put into our website story and ultimately the next day's story. So the story was written essentially. People who wanted, the 140 character tweets could see what was going on tweet by tweet, and those who didn't have Twitter could see it on our website.
Yeah.
And it worked perfectly.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was kind of platforms. There's a lot out there as far as Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Storify, a lot of other, there's every day it seems like there's something you have to learn how to bring your content out. One of the projects we did at the PG that I'm particularly proud of, that Mila was a big part of, is Digs. And we used Tumblr. It's a very simple blog platform, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, and it really nicely displays photos. And so we wanted to do something historic in nature, take our photo archive, and there's a lot of nostalgia in Pittsburgh, in this community, for events of days gone by, for lack of a better term. And so, Mila and photographer Steve Mellon have worked really hard on finding interesting photos. Whenever they're posted on Facebook, they get a lot of response. This Tumblr's done, really performed, I think, above and beyond what we even expected. There's Bill Clinton in Pittsburgh in 1992. Tom Starzl, obviously, well known for his contributions to Madison. But there's been a lot of feedback on this, and it wasn't necessarily, what we wanted was to get archival information out there and get people, drum up this nostalgia or sense of history or a sense of, sort of the Post-Gazette's role in the community. And so, they worked very hard to present it in a way that would be shareable, really nice looking, very sort of simple and clean. So Mila, maybe you could talk a little bit about what goes behind what pictures you and Steve choose for, display on the Digs.
Well, I can just say that, the Digs is a project that kind of was natural for Tumblr. We were thinking about our archive, and anytime I put anything on Facebook of historical value, a picture, it's amazing how much of a positive feeling, sharing, liking is going on. And this content is the most popular content. And in the world of social media, especially today, during the political campaign, it's very divisive. And sometimes, people start, being really, really offensive to one another. And the discourse is not of the highest quality. But this content is something that brings people together, because I think, there is a sense of history, especially when you open those manila folders that have never been digitized and probably were stored after they have been put in the newspaper. And you open, like one picture we found was Kennedy in Pittsburgh, and
Showing the Jesse Jackson one behind it.
the photo was actually folded in half, and there was nothing written on the back of it. And then we went to the original paper, we discovered the story behind it, and we put it on the Digs. The Digs is updated daily, from Monday to Friday. We put one photo a day. We also post those photos on Facebook pages, and actually on our Facebook page, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And it's really interesting what kind of comments it generates. With that Kennedy photo, there were people who were saying, "Oh, that policeman guy is my father," or another woman said, "Oh, I wish I was there. And my mom made me to go to dance class." And all those stories come alive, and all those pictures acquire new sort of value.
that's when we try to engage. And, you know, Mila obviously gets a lot of the credit. She works very hard on this and finding, you know, I think something that she said during the evening of Podcamp event that we did that was, you know, make your engagement meaningful, or make the discourse meaningful. And that really resonated with me because a lot of times, you know, I socialize on Twitter, or, you know, just, you do things and say things that are just funny and amusing and, you know, but to really up your game a little bit and make it more meaningful. To me, I feel like that's, you know, if we're going to be held to a little bit of a higher standard in the media, that's something that is definitely worth aspiring to. So I don't want to make this though talking at you guys. I mean, I hoped to make this sort of a open to discussion kind of thing. So if you guys don't mind, I was going to just, we get about 20 minutes left, open it up to discussion. And if there's any questions that you have for me or any of the panelists, if we could maybe talk about some things that you're wondering about. Or yes?
I'm one of those people that really likes facts in my news. So this whole trend
Me
towards
too.
News being entertainment and news being commentary and opinion is really kind of disturbing. So I really get how the social media technology helps you find stories and report stories faster, get them out there faster, and hopefully more accurately. But my question would be, just because somebody's talking about things, does that make it news? I mean, I don't care if Lindsay Lohan gets arrested again. I don't think that's news. But because a whole bunch of people are talking about it, then certain news media organizations, not disparaging any of yours, might see that as an opportunity to get more viewers and readers, and therefore it becomes news.
Certainly, and I think that's a great question.
Is there anything, what's the question on this? Is there any tendency, is there any thought given towards, just because people are talking about it, is this news?
Pretty much on a daily basis,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think, I'll let the other panelists speak to this, but just my take on it is, if I don't want to know what's going on with Lindsay Lohan or other celebrities, that's just not who I'm going to follow on Twitter. You know, I choose who I follow on Twitter because I'm interested in what they have to say, and you know, hopefully they're providing content that's engaging to me. To me, that's the beauty of social media is you don't have to consume news that doesn't interest you. You don't have to, you know, I would like everyone to read everything that the Post-Gazette puts on our Facebook and Twitter page, but there may be some content that just isn't what you're interested in. And so that's for us to sort of figure out how do we reach that, you know, that reader, or is this a reader that, you know, that is of value to us? Is this a reader that, you know, that we resonate with, that we're serving, and how do we serve our readers best? Who are our readers? I think knowing who your readers are, knowing who you're engaging with, is really has to inform anything that you publish, anything that you, you know, put up on social media. A good example was what Mila was talking about earlier during the Western Psych shooting. There was a photo taken outside of Western Psych by one of our photographers of people evacuating the building. Several of them had on bracelets, which indicated clearly they were patients. You couldn't necessarily identify them, but perhaps if you knew one of them, you would have recognized them. We put it on the website, and almost immediately we started getting phone calls saying, how dare you put up this photo?
And comments too.
Comments too on the website as well. You know, and not all of them were, how dare you, but many people were saying, and medical health professionals as well, mental health professionals saying, this is very stigmatizing, this could be very damaging, and so we took the photo down because the community response to it was, this is over the line, this is beyond, and you know, we had a lot of discussion that day and the next day about this was news, this is a breaking news event, these people were unfortunately part of it. Then there was the discussion of, well, these people are part of our community, some of these people are children, these are our community's children, and what is our obligation as far as they're concerned? So these are the kinds of discussions that we regularly have. I mean, what is appropriate to put out? Where is that line? And so you very much have that sensitivity, at least I do, and anyone in our newsroom would do. So maybe I could open this up to other.
From the TV side of it, and I agree with you, but from the TV side of it, what's going to draw more eyeballs, the city redistricting, rezoning an area for a strip club, or the Steelers' annual fashion show? And the Steelers' annual fashion show, sadly, is going to draw more interest, and it's about advertising dollars, and it's about numbers. So while there is a fine line, I don't think you'll ever see us report, you know what, that's a blatant lie, because we've had a Lindsay Lohan who got busted again story in the morning show. I think it's absolutely, personally, asinine. I know I'm on the web, hi boss. But it's a fine line between what people are talking about and what is news. And I agree with you guys. It is a daily struggle every single day. And I think those of us that work in the newsrooms and aren't necessarily making the decisions ask the same question. But I think, did you ask the question earlier in another? Okay, and I was sitting behind you and I wanted to respond to you because your question was, at the end, will it ever change back? And the answer is no, it will not.
News is always going to be entertainment.
It's going to be a combination of what is of value to you on a daily basis plus what is of value to us for advertiser revenue. And it's a very fine, ugly line.
I was pretty much going to say the exact same thing that Scott Harbaugh said, but at the end of the day, every news organization is competing for time on website, clicks, how many of it's shared, and that's how they base the ad revenue, and it's not going to go away. I mean,
Much to probably all of our chagrin.
Bobby, what's your sort of take on that as far as
Gosh.
who was
Well,
chasing
Bobby's
Channing Tatum around?
tweeting
so
Days
late?
of Our Lives stuff, so.
Yeah, chasing Channing Tatum around so quickly.
Well, right. But I guess part of it is my job as a reporter is to report the news that I think anybody might want. So you're right. Channing Tatum. I don't know who the hell Channing Tatum is, but I know that a lot of people.
I don't think anyone believes that, but okay.
But I know that a lot of people care about the fact that he was in Starbucks in Swickley a week and a half ago or whatever. I don't. So I took a walk down to Starbucks and I ended up seeing him in the grocery store. So I tweeted it and people retweeted the heck out of that tweet.
How'd you know to tweet it if you don't know who he is?
I know what he looks like.
Oh, okay.
I don't know anything. I don't know what he's been in. I don't know why he's popular. But a lot of it is, TMZ, for instance, is an entertainment news source that now is credible for the most part. For the most part, I think. But
Yes, yeah.
but
They're
not-
usually first.
they are usually first, and sometimes right.
Yeah.
But I go there for entertainment news. I don't go to USA Today or New York Times or the Post Gazette to learn what Lindsay Lohan is doing. So I make sure to go where I want to go and what I want to find. But I know not everybody does that.
Right.
Somebody might want just Lindsay Lohan news 24/7 because she is always in the news.
I do think I've seen New York Times tweets about Lindsay Lohan.
That's sad.
That makes me a little sad. Yeah.
But I think that it's always sort of a struggle, whether you go with the hard news, or you go with fluff. And sometimes, why not ride on this like and share sort of wave? But I think that, sometimes you actually can, from the political standpoint, I'm just going to bring this example up because it's so fresh in our minds. The political campaign and the debates got covered through memes, and a lot of news outlets would cover memes. We're going to talk about memes. Who cares about Romney Obama? Let's talk about memes. So I think that, and binders full of women, and Big Bird, and bayonets. But then, I think what reporters bring into this conversation, and people who cover this, they bring substance to those symbols. Although it's far from Lindsay Lohan example, but binders full of women, they started analyzing it, and it turned out that, there were no binders by Romney, and I think that this is what a lot of people are struggling with in how to fashion the story, how to present it. Sometimes I think, we, even in our newsroom, why should we cover this story? Nobody's going to read it. And sometimes I think it's legitimate because if some future writer thinks that it's a big trend, but it's not because it's going to die on our website, why should we cover it? So I think that the struggle is something that is every single newsroom.
Yeah, and it is, but the trouble is, what I'm showing up here is a live look at what people are reading on the Post Gazette's website right now. It's just a visualization of it, but we cover weather because look what people are reading right now. We cover the Steelers and we put the Steelers news up and post it on Twitter because people read the Steelers news. So I mean, you have to also think about what the marketplace is demanding. People want Steelers news, they devour it, they comment on it, they retweet it, they tell us that we don't know what we're talking about, So you have to also recognize that you're in an industry where your readers are driving what you're covering to a great extent, and if you're getting response from weather stories, if you're getting response from Steelers stories, you have to be in touch with that readership, I think, and that's also another fine line. How much is too much? And people say, oh, I'm so sick of hearing about, Heinz Ward, or I'm so sick of hearing about, pick your topic, but that's the kind of news that resonates. And when you have analytics like this, and you have metrics that show you get engagement, or you get response, or you get views, it's hard to ignore that. It's hard to brush that off and say we really should, this isn't news, because maybe we're not the only ones to judge what's news. I know that Scott Harbaugh doesn't want to officially comment on the Frankenstorm, but the other day when this story was sort of starting to become a scary thing, I saw we have Associated Press access, and I saw the story coming up, and it was getting more and more alarming and talking about what's happening in Cuba, and so I put it on the website to see what would the response be. Is there any interest or people? And it was immediately shot to the top of the list. People were retweeting it, people were sharing it, and you don't want to scare people, you don't want to overly alarm people, but my thinking was, and sort of the consensus in the newsroom was, it's better to have people prepared for something like a weather event that turns out not to be as bad than to have them not prepared, and then you didn't provide them information that may have helped them be prepared. So that was sort of my sort of motivation. But sometimes it seems like you're overemphasizing it or you're overplaying it. But to me, I'd rather overplay something like that than underplay it. And maybe Scott feels a little different.
No, I'd rather underplay it, actually.
Well,
Really?
okay.
I really would rather underplay it, because here's what happened this week, and this happens a lot. Yes, I'm going to throw AccuWeather and the Weather Channel completely under the bus.
Go for it.
People hear 10 days out, worst case scenario, and it's being reported sometimes, not by local media, not by the paper or the TV here, but it's being reported as, hey, worst case scenario. And the mistake that happened all week is people kept hearing Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania. Well, most of the worst of this is going to be eastern Pennsylvania. So if you find some shameless self-promotion here, but if you follow me on Facebook or Twitter, I've been saying since Tuesday, time out, hold on, let's talk
Definitely
about...
been the voice of reason. That's
Trying to be, I never said that it wasn't a possibility, but I love this.
Yeah.
Western Pennsylvania may miss out on the brunt of Hurricane Sandy. So we're trying to save for 5 minutes.
Should have put out a post as that.
I should have commented on that. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it is going to be rainy, it is going to be windy, there are probably going to be some flooding issues in some areas, there are probably going to be some power outage issues in some areas, especially in the mountains. It is not going to be Snowmageddon all over again. It is not going to be blizzard of 93, because the dynamics just aren't there this time of year. It's going to be ugly, but places like, if you go skiing down Lake Snowshoe, if you're a snowshoe fan, they're going to get like 2 feet of snow this week. But not downtown Pittsburgh. We might see some snow, but the problem is, it's the scare tactics. I mean, they want clicks, and it has to do with what's entertainment and what's news, what's responsible and what's promotable.
Yeah.
And promotable and responsible can sometimes be two different things. So, people like to run with worst case scenarios. Also, like we talked about, the negative comments that we get.
But not always. With pit bomb threats, this was a situation where we actually were very cognizant of the fact that if we report every single threat, it's going to actually motivate, a person who sends those threats to send more, because it gets a lot of... I'm talking like national outlets that are trying to pump up a storm. No, you're absolutely right. It's definitely apples and oranges situation, but but you're right. It's a matter of being careful, being responsible, no matter what the situation is, and sometimes it just doesn't happen, shamefully.
Cristilla's raising her hand down the front.
Sir, all basically the Wild West of this. So you're using your own brain to make a responsible decision about how much you have to do. Obviously, Mila is she just talked about the bombings, but who really is guiding your decision? I mean, you have a written paper, you have a public, a television scenario. Who's really guiding it? Is it you in your head, or is there a set of guidelines that you're following somewhere, that are mysteriously behind the scenes?
Yeah, well, I think the driving principle is be responsible. That sounds really boring, but I think use common sense is really, there's been a lot of discussion in our newsroom and other newsrooms about having a social media policy, what you can tweet, what you can't tweet, what to post on Facebook, how to use your personal account, are you always considered a member of the media, or can you have off time, or what have you. But I think the overriding principle is use common sense. I have access to the Post-Gazette's Twitter account and Facebook pages, and I keep TweetDeck open with my personal Twitter and my sort of work Twitter. And I think there's not one among us who hasn't accidentally tweeted something to the work account. I haven't done it with the PG yet, but that was intended to be something, a joke or something to your personal Twitter. So my policy personally is count to 10 before you post, count to 10 before you tweet, because make sure number one you have the right account you're tweeting from, and make sure that this is what you really want to say, because it's out there. We talked a lot about, Bobby and I earlier, about when you tweet something, when you mistweet something, you have a typo, you tweet something that's not correct. Should you delete it, or should you tweet something later and say, you know what, that was wrong, here's what's correct? To me, the second option is what you do, because you've deleted it, but it still lives elsewhere. It still lives in screen grabs, and people can say, well, why are you deleting your tweets? And so you open up a whole other can of worms. But to me, there isn't a set of rules. You have to use your journalism training and your sense of balance and what's ethical and what's news and what isn't, and you have to use common sense. And I think that's, if you're using that as your motivation, that's at least a good place to start from. But I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on that.
I was going to say, when I first started using Twitter as a journalist, my first thought was anything you wouldn't say to your mother, I wouldn't, tweet on a work account. But then I realized that
Bobby's mother.
well, then I realized who my mother was. But so the mindset I go with is with Twitter professionally is, if it wouldn't be something that we would print in the paper, it doesn't belong on a social media account. So no swearing, nothing that wouldn't be in the paper. And then conversely, anything from the readers as a comment, we were talking about comments earlier, if it wouldn't be a letter to the editor, we generally wouldn't keep the comment. And that's sort of the mindset that I follow, because I'm still representing the paper on my accounts, and I've got a lot of responsibility to do it right and make sure that all of you can trust me and know that what I'm doing is professional and not, being a jagoff.
You can't say jagoff in the Post-Gazette, you probably don't.
As Chris Dillon knows, on my personal Twitter feed, I loosen up and show people I'm human, and I don't follow the same rules Bobby follows. I sort of tend to have fun, and I do swear, and I do say things that sometimes I shouldn't say. But at the end of the day, and getting back to your question back there, is that Neela went to this conference for the Online News Association, and she posted a link to the keynote speaker. And the number one trend is that more and more people are not trusting what they're reading in the news organizations. And I think that is going to eventually affect what we're doing. And the other thing that the woman spoke about was that they're developing apps where you're going to be able to use your smartphone to vet your local news organizations to see how accurate they are. So maybe when some of that kind of stuff gets put into place, things will change.
That would be better, because what happens now is you hear something in one place and you attribute it to somewhere else that isn't the case, whether it be news or weather or any sort of story. It's confusing because there are so many messages out there with bloggers and news sites that you hear something somewhere and yeah, Bobby said that, when Bobby never said it in a million years. It happens.
But I think that actually every situation is different. Sometimes, with breaking news, we get together in a group and say, this is what we shouldn't be doing, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to act. So throughout all the platforms, our standards and our message is consistent. And I think, that our guidelines sort of to reporters is, don't do stupid things. Think before you tweet, and read every tweet, be strategic, strive for meaningful conversations, and try to gain journalistic value from all the interactions with social media. And I think that people are intrigued by it, and they see those who succeed in those in getting value from those conversations. They want to learn, they want to strive, they want to get more out of this media and figure out the synergy between sort of traditional media and ways of distributing information, but also ways where we could work together. We could, make meaningful information, sort of put it out and seek collaboration from the community. So I think, with different situations, sometimes we do have to flesh out the details in a team, so we are strategically working on putting out the same message and are consistent.
Wow, that would be a really good note to end on right there. Very nicely put and very articulate. But if there's any other questions, I wanted to make sure. Yes, Deanne.
I'm just gonna ruin it, so.
Okay, go ahead.
This is for the PR people in the audience.
Yeah.
I know there's a handful over here.
How many are PR people in the audience, by the way? Okay, and how many people, I'm trying to get a sense of who is in the audience here and get a sense of how many bloggers are in the audience, or how would you identify yourself as bloggers? No, not many. A few. Okay. So, anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm just sort of curious what the makeup of our audience is.
So in terms of media relations, so one thing I like to do is follow some of the reporters who I'm pitching on Twitter and interact with them, but I try to not just like send them a pitch via tweet, because first of all, I don't have a lot of space, and second of all, I think it's sort of invasive. Are you guys, just from your perspective, are you comfortable with a PR person just talking to you on Twitter and then maybe emailing you and then pitching you? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think you raise a good point that, you don't necessarily know this person, but, and also it's not a private forum, so that if you want to make a pitch specifically to one reporter, for reporters, having a story exclusively is much more valuable, obviously. So, you sort of lose that. I mean, for me personally, I'd rather, I don't mind. In my job right now, I'm not reporting, but it doesn't bother me to be contacted. But a lot of times, I'm just not the right person. I think what's frustrating as a former reporter is when someone's pitching you something and it's not your beat, or it's not an area you cover, and they just don't know anything about you, and that's almost like getting the stock press release that has nothing to do with what you cover.
Or when the email gets your name wrong.
Or they spell your name wrong.
Yeah.
I apologize on behalf of
But I think though that I think a lot of the same rules apply how you pitch otherwise. Sending a press release or making contact or knowing who you're pitching. I think Wendy, one of my, I can't see if she's here or not, but she went to a center earlier here and was talking about we want to have sort of a 5-to-1 ratio of entertaining tweets and business tweets if you're doing that. And I think that's a good sort of rule of thumb for contact. So don't think you're going to pitch a reporter the first time you ever tweet at them, but if it's someone you're engaging with, or you run into an event, or what, I really think there has to be more than just a social media call out or connection. I think that's not a bad way to start, but don't think that you're going to get your story. To me, what's more valuable is if I'm writing a story and I'm talking about it. I did this when I was at the Business Times. I'm writing about a story. I need some graphic designers. Anyone out there who can comment on this story? And a couple of PR folks go back to me and said, I could get you in touch with this guy or that guy. And it was actually a really good sort of way to sort of crowdsource. And to me, that's the more valuable PR person, the person who's delivering what I'm looking for. And that's the person that maybe the next time when they pitch you, you're more open to it because you've sort of developed a little bit of a working relationship with them. But I would rather hear it from the reporters who are more in the field than I am at this time. So, Bobby, what are you pitching on Twitter?
Well, Wendy had asked a question on Twitter about that. Do you like to be pitched a story on Twitter? And I replied no. because Twitter moves too fast for me to keep involved. So I would sooner get that PR material via email or even actually snail mail sometimes, because I don't get a lot of snail mail anymore. So it's nice to actually read a press release that I can sit on my desk. Honestly.
Interesting.
But if you pitch me
I'm
a
genuinely
story,
surprised
if
when
you
you said
pitch me a story via Twitter, it's easy for me to just pass it up and not even see the tweet or not think about it, because it's not as personal as, you know. But going back to, please get my name right, because I go by Bobby and I get so many PR press releases that say, "Hi Robbie, how are you?" Drives me up a wall. Delete.
If I'm following like an organization on Twitter, it's because I'm interested in what they're doing, and I will find it on there first on Twitter before I'll find it anywhere. So if you're like if you're representing a company and you have a news release and you put a link on Twitter, I'm going to see it. And you know, I enjoy Twitter for that reason. And personally, I can't stand email anymore. And if you have a news release that you particularly wanted me to see it, then do send me a direct tweet. Yeah, sure.
Wow, so good luck, PR people.
But you know, your relationship on Twitter with the reporter is going to be the same as a relationship anywhere else. You're going to want to maintain a good one, or you're not going to get very far. Probably.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
I think it's also about, value and about the history of interactions. You can't just sort of, I think that the longer you interact and retweet the person or, have a series of interactions, the more likely the person is to relate to you. I think that, a lot of reporters who I have spoken to, they relate to people who retweet them or comment on things that they tweet. And they say that every single follower that comments on my tweet is 5 times more valuable than the follower who just follows. But I think that if you strive for those meaningful interactions and follow-ups, then you should contribute equally if you expect that.
Well, it's 4 o'clock. We're at the end of our time, but I wanted to thank everybody for coming. I hope this was useful, at least interesting. If you have other questions, I'll be here for a little bit afterwards. I want to thank the panel for a lively discussion and coming out on a Saturday, and just really happy to be at Podcamp and hope that this has been helpful and that you'll stay in touch with us via Twitter, via Facebook, and check out the dig. It's a really cool Tumblr. So thanks very much, everybody.
Please get your bread and milk.
Get your
Oat and ore will be fine.
Thanks very much, everybody. It's really